Yeah, I'm thinking we run this new show that explores how YouTube styles have evolved over time and... Oh no.
Yeah, what is it?
Oh, he's back. Please, please, please don't let him into that Yep, he's tearing the door down. Yeah, he just threw that last guy out of the chair. Here we go again. Good morning, YouTube poop. You must have missed me oh so much in that time where I told you I was gone for good. Well, lucky or unlucky for you, I am a liar. Sort of. I'm thinking this is probably the last BlueCast that your buddy Lizardman Joe will be making in the next 3 months. I still have no time for this, regardless of whether I got my passion back or not. But while I did have some time off for break, I wanted you to have this little vidlet. I'm taking it to the home channel because my time as circus leader has run its course. So without further ado, let's begin this BlueCast. In recent news, the Senate released a report detailing the enhanced interrogation techniques used by the CIA. President Obama worked a deal with Cuba to normalize relations. Protests regarding the deaths of Michael Brown and Eric Gardner continue all across the country. And finally, I still have not gotten my Ebola yet, despite being one of the first people to place my order. To the actual BlueCast. So usually when I do these things, I compile data, lists, or find a recent event and use it as a weapon to drive home an overarching point that I really want to make. In this one, I have that overarching point I want to make. And I don't have my hand too much on the pulse of the community, but this is the type of message that it could always use. I'm going to tell you a story, but I think to get you in the mood, I want to show you a clip. Longtime fans of this show know that I have a sort of mortal enemy. Some people say I'm exaggerating, but it's true. This guy's a real piece of work. He has his own show. The points he makes are always hypocritical, contradicting, and sometimes just overwhelmingly stupid. I've spent so much of the BlueCast history talking about this one guy. You already know who it is, and you're probably just cringing thinking about his voice. So let's not drag it out any longer. Let me show you something I found digging through his old videos.
Where does serious become too serious? I always kind of think of it this way. When something from YouTube or the community starts to affect your life in some significant and negative way, that's when it's too seriously. This community should not affect your life. It should not mess your life up, and you shouldn't let it come even close to that. When you spend too much time working on videos, or doing whatever it is you people do in this community, rather than having fun in the real world, you're taking it all too seriously.
Yeah, that guy. Now actually, before we go on, how many of you actually thought I was going to play a clip from YouTube News? It was a good joke, right? It's a little more than a joke, actually. It's a segue into something else. If you're not a longtime follower of my show, or even if you are, you might not think anything I said was all that wrong. It may even sound like I had great intentions making it. I'll still stand by my statements that you shouldn't let YouTube mess up your life, but the problem was with the context, as well as the lack of context. The thing you need to know is that point I was making was number 1 on my top 10 list of things that impressionable YouTubers do. It was that they take YouTube too seriously. No irony there, right? Any veteran BlueCast watcher can tell you that only the YouTube pros and those close to the target can tell you that entire list was just me trying to give a subtle middle finger to Stu and his fans. That episode could and honestly should be retitled to Top 10 Things That Stu and His Fans Do That I Hate. And of course the true G's will remember that this episode actually did have a very blatant jab at Stu and his fans in the number 2 slot. So how could this be the case if it was so close to being the main point of the video? The truth is it was all planned, pretty well too. For a long time in my history I rallied support for TLD by rallying anger against Stu and Yuchu. There are a few times I was actually really that infuriated by Stu, but by putting on the act it helped me more than I ever could without it. I talk about this at length in my apology video, so if you want a more comprehensive history of my game against Stu, you can watch it there. I'm really trying to avoid reliving the worst of my moments in YouTube. Here was my biggest dilemma of that time though. While the more aggressive you got towards the 2 targets, the more tightly you pulled in people who agreed with you, but you also drove away the moderates, the bulk of the YouTube community, who could be great friends, but didn't really care for the whole I hate Stu thing. Basically, it was a balancing act. You had to be as aggressive as you could towards the other side without seeming like a complete dick. This BlueCast was my clever solution. target a very vague and broad category of YouTubeers and rewire the list to make it look like you're trying to help them, while sneaking in some jabs at Stu and his supporters whenever you can. Moderates don't mind it, and it makes you look better when Stu and others start doing things on that specific list. It made me look pretty justified in going after them. Plus, once you get to the number 2 spot, you really draw in the anti-Stu crowd on that point, while not alienating the moderates enough. Then you see the final point in 2 different lights. The people who don't like Stu think that I'm bashing Stu and saying he has no life, while the rest of the people think I'm still talking generally about this mysterious and impressionable group of YouTubeers. And no, you can't say I'm reading into this too much because I wrote it myself. I knew what I was doing. I look back on these things sometimes with a combination of admiration and disgust from myself. Now maybe you can think, oh, but that would never work. As clever as it was, I'm sure it freaking failed. And maybe you're right. I mean, hey, I'm not exactly sitting on the TLD empire right now, am I? So I hit half of my point home. I was clearly being a dish rag when I made this video and had bad motives for making these points. However, from my experience in debate, I would never rest my entire argument on the fact that my opponent was being a dish rag. It doesn't prove that any of their points were wrong. As I said, I stand by the fact that I don't think you should let YouTube poop harm your real life, but I take serious issue with 2 major statements and the overarching point of the final spot. I said without context that YouTube poop should not affect your real life, period. And then I made another vague statement like this, but it's also the overarching point, which for some reason, and everyone else makes this when they say this too, I neglected to mention why it mattered. It was that for some reason, real life was infinitely more important than, I guess, what we would call internet life? Whether you choose to believe it, we live in an interesting time. It may be completely forgotten by history, but note that our first steps into the internet and the digital age will determine the future of the world. We live in an age where hacking can cause 10 times the loss that the best planned and executed burglary in the past could have done. An age where cyberbullying is becoming one of the leading causes of teen suicide. Old-timer adults who think they have everything figured out will just say, well then don't use the internet if it's causing that many problems. And that's honestly the most ignorant thing I've heard in my whole life. You want to connect with old friends? Better have some form of social media. You want to get reliable news? The age of televised news is dying. And I don't know where I'd be without being able to access my bank account online, and I have less than $1,000 to my name right now. We have already plunged deep into the digital age, and the concept that we can go on living a perfectly normal life without it now is really absurd. Remember dial-up internet connections? Because I bet a huge chunk of the American youth doesn't, let alone remember an age where the internet didn't exist. But because I have changed a little over the years, you're still screaming at me, what's the freaking point? And the point is, why the hell are we still acting like this stuff we do on the internet isn't life? I use Skype, Steam, Facebook, iMessage to talk to all my friends from high school, almost as much as I talk to people in real life. I know people in college who have long-distance relationships that are going stronger than ever thanks to the fact that they're never really that far apart, regardless of what the distance says about it. You need to wake up. This stuff is real life now. The friends that you make in YouTube Poop and anywhere online can be just as real as the ones you meet in school, at work, or at a friend's party. It's about time we stopped acting like we shouldn't care about this stuff. Well, really, it's about time we stopped acting like we shouldn't care about anything. But that trend has been actually dying down a bit, which I'm really happy about. I said it in the farewell BlueCast, and I'll say it again. YouTube Poop is serious business. It was a joke for the longest time, but it turned out to be one of the truest things I've ever said. I think that the best way to make this point is with the story I want to tell you. And then I can let you go back into the real world. In 2010, before the BlueCast, before TLD, and before Dictator Joe, I was just Dan. I was an average high school freshman, although not really. I went to a high school where none of my friends from middle school went to, and I felt alone for a long time. I managed to fill this void by being Joe the Blue Dragon, a guy on YouTube who made YouTube Poop and had associates on the website. Young Dan did not believe that you could make friends on the internet, that were anywhere near as close as your friends in real life. Which was funny because how would he know he didn't have friends in real life? He didn't have friends at all. Or so he thought. This particular Friday, Dan was really down in the dumps. He wanted to let it out, but making another depressed Facebook status was not going to get him the attention of anyone but his parents, who would only be more worried for him. He thought there's no negative consequences for posting one of these now non-existent YouTube announcements saying that you feel more or less like killing yourself, right? No one will care. Well, people did care. I was rushed by these people who, even though no one else had ever treated me this nicely, I didn't consider friends. These people wanted me to feel better and wanted me to snap out of it and show me that people did care about me. I was genuinely surprised and my entire mood changed. There were people outside of my family who actually cared if I was still breathing the next day. These people were YouTubeers. Doom Zappo, CS188, Bender Pictures, and they were my friends. I decided to tell my dad that I wanted to go to the school football game that he had been pushing me to go to all week, and he was pleasantly surprised. The game sucked. We lost hard. However, early in the time I was there, I saw a kid I knew from cross country, and I just started talking with him. We joked about how our football team sucked, and how people cared too much about sports, and how our coach was a hard ass, and just other things. We never really talked before then, but he's one of my best friends today, and I don't know if he would be if I didn't find the strength to pull myself out of the mud that day. And the thing was, I didn't even really need that much strength, because it turns out people were already trying to pull me out. These people, who apparently weren't part of my real life, were affecting it more than any friends had ever before. And you're looking at this thinking, well, that's nice for you, Joe, but people don't care for me like they did for you. And fun fact, you're lying to yourself. Everyone in this community, regardless of how much they seem to be universally hated or think they're universally hated, has someone who cares about them and wants to talk to them the next day. And they also have people who would like them a lot if they started talking. So yeah, next time someone tells you that you're caring too much about YouTube, or they tell you the phrase straight from hell, "You're taking things too seriously," you can tell them to touch a dick, because they don't know what they're talking about. YouTube Poop is not some portal to Narnia that you find in your wardrobe. It's a real part of your life, and it can make you a better person, or it can make you a worse person. This BlueCast, much like the top 10 we discussed, was incredibly well planned. I showed you 2 examples of how YouTube Poop affected my life and my image of myself. In both instances, I took YouTube Poop very seriously, but one of them nearly destroyed my sanity and made me a hateful person, while the other probably freaking saved my life and made me stop hating myself. YouTube Poop is really what you make of it. I don't know how many times I've said that, but I'll keep saying it until I drill it into everyone's head. YouTube Poop is life. Real life. Don't fool yourself into thinking that this is a different world with people who don't exist after you leave your computer. Everyone in here is a real person, and we need to start acting like it. I want you to grow as a person like I did. I want you to succeed, and I want you to fail. I want you to fail because then you won't make the same mistake in the real world when you're done with YouTube Poop. So keep this in mind as you go into your real life, whatever you consider that to be. I hope you have a great rest of the day. This is Lizardman Joe, and I'm signing out.